man who has trouble walking and talking should not be in power. Every time we can see his speeches and be shocked by what he says. The last time President Biden ran in the New Hampshire primary, he didn't stick around to see the results. For the state's 2024 primary, his name isn't even on the ballot.
Hi, Jackie. Biden's name is not on the ballot because the DNC is not recognizing this primary. So that has angered New Hampshire Democrats who say they're taking matters into their own hands. Taking a step back, New Hampshire has been the first in the nation primary for over 100 years. This changed in February when the DNC decided to give that title to South Carolina. It is in New Hampshire state law that they are to be the first in the nation primary. And with the Granite State unable and unwilling to move, the DNC has told them that their primary won't count.
Back in 2020, he was a supposed frontrunner struggling to look like one, fresh off a sluggish performance in the 2020 Iowa caucuses. He asked New Hampshire voters to help him flip the narrative and deliver him a comeback. He snarked back at critics, belittled a younger challenger, and called one woman a lying, dog-faced pony soldier at a campaign event.
So you're arguably the candidate with the greatest advantage in this race. You've been the vice president, you weren't burdened down by the impeachment trials, in the participation. So how do you explain the performance in Iowa, and why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
It's a good question. Number one, Iowa's a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying, dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. It was a little bit confusing in Iowa, number one. But let's assume everything was exactly right in Iowa. The idea that you come in with about half the delegates that the leaders come in with in Iowa does not necessarily say how you're going to win.
When do polls open and close in New Hampshire? Then he skipped his own campaign party, headed to South Carolina, and finished a distant 5th in New Hampshire's primary, faring worse than the former mayor of a mid-sized Midwestern city. Why wasn't Biden on the 2024 New Hampshire primary ballot? Almost 4 years later, Mr. Biden and national Democrats have helped create a situation where the president's name won't even appear on New Hampshire 2024 primary ballot.
Yeah, and for Democrats there, it's a different story. Kind of interesting. The DNC telling Democrats don't vote in the primaries there. And most notably, of course, President Biden won't even be on the New Hampshire primary ballot.
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting situation because the DNC has been fighting about the calendar and New Hampshire didn't want to give up its position. It's essentially having an unsanctioned primary, and there are plenty of people on the ballot. Just doesn't include the incumbent, President Biden. So those of us who are into this and cover it, we know what's happening here. But there's this strange psychological thing that may happen when the results come out from New Hampshire and people hear that a Democrat other than President Biden won. Now, listen, there's a big push for write-in balloting for him. He could still win here. But there's that psychological impact from those who don't know what's going on here in New Hampshire and may hear a headline that the incumbent president was beat by somebody else in his party. But as you know, it's important to know he's not on the ballot.
He is instead limited to only being a write-in option, while a younger congressman from his own party tries to replace him as the presumptive Democratic nominee, citing fears the incumbent could lose to the likely Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump, in the general election. When is the next primary after New Hampshire? Mr. Biden's move to ignore New Hampshire's primary, making him the first incumbent president in more than a half-century to not file in the state's early voting contest, is far from an ideal situation for a candidate facing questions about his age and political standing.
Now to the other side of the aisle. President Biden has a predicament of his own making right now in New Hampshire. The president actually not listed on next week's Democratic primary ballot. That, if you're wondering why, is because he wanted South Carolina to host the Democrats' first sanctioned primary. Remember, South Carolina is basically the state that launched his campaign last go-around. So the president is refusing to have his name listed in New Hampshire. Supporters are afraid of a symbolic loss and are mounting a write-in campaign. So, Chris, Mick, come on back, because the president is not going to be on the ballot there in New Hampshire next week. I was reading Jim Messina, Obama world, basically making the point, Lisa Murkowski, the senator in Alaska, in 2010, she got 39% in a write-in campaign there. And I said, wait a minute, is he comparing the president of the United States to a sitting United States senator. Anyways, that...
How many delegates does New Hampshire have for the 2024 primary, and how are they awarded? It just sets up an incumbent president for a potential embarrassment, said Steve Dupre, a former Republican National Committeeman from New Hampshire who supported Mr. Biden in the 2020 general election, but is backing former South Carolina Gov. Nikki Haley in this year's GOP primary.
How important is New Hampshire going to be tonight? Because people haven't actually finished voting and we have not started counting yet.
I think it's very important. Witness the fact that President Trump came here 7 times last year. I think he's been in New Hampshire this year almost that many times. He was at a polling place today. I think obviously he's trying to score a knockout punch and end this process early. If Nikki Haley can win or come close, I think that keeps her alive. If she were to win, obviously the money would be dramatic. If she comes close, probably not quite so much, but certainly she has shown she's the only one left standing. So if you don't want Donald Trump to be the nominee, she's the candidate you have to vote for.
Well, but the polls suggest right now that not enough people will vote for her or want to vote for her. 22 points behind the latest Suffolk University Boston Globe poll, Trump at 60%. We always talk about New Hampshire as the potential for an upset, right? Because historically that has happened. How likely is it to happen this time around?
Well, Dave Scanlon, our Secretary of State, learned from Bill Gardner, who was always great at predicting the turnout. And he predicted a record turnout among the undeclared voters. There are 350,000 of them. If there's a really significant turnout there, you offset that margin in the Republican Party.
Who is on the ballot for the 2024 New Hampshire primary? Determined. New England Democrats are leading a write-in campaign to help Mr. Biden in Tuesday's primary against Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson, the two leading candidates whose names are actually on the New Hampshire Democratic primary ballot. Although long-standing New Hampshire law means the state has to hold the first presidential primary, Mr. Biden and the Democratic National Committee tried to change that after he became president.
You think that's a risk, that the president is losing a lot of people doing this?
Well, I think the people are watching. I think people are horrified. 70% of Democrats have said they want to hear from other voices. As your coverage just showed, the president is very low in his numbers, maybe not as low as you said, who knows. But there's a lot of rumbling out there, and people do not appreciate the fact that the DNC has chosen to manipulate the process like this.
They don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from Congressman Phillips, who will also be on this show, that it's a coronation. He is the party's nominee, end of story. He wouldn't be the first incumbent to try to pull that, but what do you think of that? Because you're pushed to the side.
Well, what I think of it is that we're going to see on Tuesday what the voters of New Hampshire have to say. New Hampshire has stood up to the DNC so far on this. When they try to remove it from the line, the state constitution says here, no, we're having our primary.
Who's running for president in 2024? Meet the candidates. Their plans called for the first primary to be held in South Carolina, the more diverse southern state that gave Mr. Biden his first 2020 primary win and revived his White House run. Iowa was jettisoned from the first caucus slot, and New Hampshire was told it could remain an early voting state but would be moved down to sharing its primary day with Nevada. It is really hard for us to continue to tell black and brown people that you are the core of our base, but the first 2 states are 2 of the whitest states in America, said Michael Blake, a former DNC vice chair and Obama White House aide.
This is who they are. They are just a dishonest group of people. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is what they're planning to do, because they want to get people nervous and afraid and think, okay, it's pointless to go out and vote for him. But what we know is that the Democrats can't be trusted. More and more people are waking up to the devices that they use. And so I don't think it'll work. I do think that people are tired of Joe Biden, even the people that voted for him. So I think that still people will get out and vote. Gas is too high, food is too high, and people realize he's just a senile old man who most of the time don't even know that he's with us. And so whatever the Democrats try, I don't think it's going to work.
New Hampshire refused to budge and defied the DNC, costing them national clout and leading Mr. Biden's campaign to swear off the state's primary. Mr. Biden's 2024 re-election campaign did not comment when asked about the New Hampshire primary. That silence has meant the president's New Hampshire allies have had to fill the void and call attention to Mr. Biden's record on infrastructure, gun safety, and the environment.
Yeah, David, say that 5 times fast. Biden, right in. We're here at the Puritan Backroom, as you mentioned. You know, they're known for their chicken tenders around here, but tonight they're certainly known for one of the largest write-in grassroots efforts of this election, and it just happens to be for the current president of the United States. Joe Biden spent zero campaign dollars in New Hampshire this cycle and made very few, if any, appearances. So his supporters had to ultimately find another way around this, and write-in was their way to go.
This has been an amazing grassroots effort.
Thanks for coming out to vote.
New Hampshire voters are known for being engaged in the political process, but some Democratic voters have been working overtime to get President Joe Biden on the ballot.
I was disappointed that I wasn't going to be able to vote for him in the normal way that I would have, but I was happy to be able to write him in.
A write-in campaign for the current president. That has not happened here since Lyndon Johnson in 1968. The Biden campaign never filed their paperwork after the Democratic Party decided to move its first-in-the-nation primary to South Carolina.
Some well-known out-of-state Democrats have helped with the cause, even though DNC officials wrote in a recent letter that the party primary New Hampshire is holding is meaningless. The one thing I have heard from Democrats all over the state is, if there has ever been an election when we need to be united, it is this election coming up in November, said Jim Demers, a leader of the write-in campaign. Division is Donald Trump's best friend.
Well, clearly after the DNC made its decision and its rule that it passed conflicted with our law, we knew that if we were going to get Joe Biden on the ballot, it would have to be through a write-in effort. So many of us feel that this is the most critical election of our time. That, you know, you hear people all the time saying that democracy is at risk if Donald Trump wins the presidency again. And we truly do believe that. So our feeling is by organizing and getting this write-in effort underway, not only does it help send a really powerful message that voters in New Hampshire are concerned and willing to go the extra mile to not only vote for Joe Biden, but to write him in, but it also helps us lay the foundation for the big prize, which is November. And if you know the polls are right and this race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump turns out to be extremely close, New Hampshire's 4 electoral votes could be the deciding state in the country.
What does Biden's absence on the ballot mean for the primary election? The contest in New Hampshire is already presenting a storm of contradictions and confusion over what it could signify and how much it matters. The Biden campaign's silence and the DNC's dismissiveness reflects the sense that the contest doesn't mean much to them. But for Mr. Biden's allies who know the state well and are hoping to try and keep the state's primary at the front of the line 4 years from now, supporting the president by writing him in is framed as being critical.
So I don't want to be overly rough on the president, but I have to say that he is the worst president that we've had in the history of our country. He's destroying our country. And you know, my wife attended the funeral 2 months ago of Rosalind Carter, and it was beautiful. And Jimmy Carter was there, and I thought to myself, Jimmy Carter is happy now because he will go down as being a brilliant president by comparison to Joe Biden. He'll be a brilliant president. He's going to be known as brilliant by comparison. So we have to stop the invasion. We have to bring down our energy. We have to, you know, I say all the time, we have more liquid gold under our feet than any other nation anywhere in the world. And we have to stop the crime, and we have to help rebuild our cities, and we have to rebuild the Capitol, Washington, D.C. I was there on one of the Biden indictment trials. You know, this is the only person this never happened before, but I go to a lot of courthouses because of Biden, because they're using that for election interference.
Trump's dominance among the GOP's base voters fueled his victory in the New Hampshire primary, according to NBC News exit poll results. While former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley managed to win independent or undeclared voters, Trump's wide margins among self-identified Republican and conservative voters were too vast to overcome. Just like last week's Iowa caucuses, the New Hampshire primary also underscored how Trump's ardent supporters have taken over the Republican base.
So based on the first results and our Fox News voter analysis, the Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses.
He will take the lion's share of the state's 40 delegates. This result really solidifies his place as the current frontrunner for the nomination. Former Governor Haley and Governor DeSantis fighting for second. And this is really going to maybe last a while because it's a close race right now, how we see it based on the numbers we're looking at. You know, the former president, overperformed in the rural parts of Iowa, but it has been overwhelming, some of these numbers from these precincts that are already starting to come in. Some of them, and we were just talking, it happens quickly.
It's incredible.
Jesse. I mean, they do it on pieces of paper, they finish it, they hear everybody talk, and it's done.
Again and again, Democratic voters who backed Joe Biden in the party's 2020 primary and now want him to step aside cite the same overriding reason: age. Biden is too old, a woman in her 60s told NBC News pollsters in a survey released earlier this month, ahead of his announcement Tuesday making his 2024 campaign official. Too old, said a man in his 70s. He'll be 86 by the time it's over, said a woman in her 50s, noting the age Biden would be if he wins re-election and serves out a second term. We need new people in there.
President Biden is already the oldest president. With more on the questions that raises, here's Nikki Schiller.
At 80, Joe Biden is already the oldest US president. If he was to win, though, in 2024, he would be 86 at the end of his second term. Now, some experts have already said that his age could be a campaign issue.
He's going to be 82 should he be reelected, and if he serves out the entirety of a second term, he'll be closer to 90 than he will be to 80. And this raises lots of concerns, justifiable concerns in my view, about his ability to fulfill all the obligations of the office, concerns about his health, his ability to actually finish out a second term and what that means.
As the oldest president in history runs for re-election, Biden is 80. Age looms as one of his most glaring vulnerabilities. Republicans are weighing how far to push the issue in the 2024 campaign without alienating older Americans who tend to be dependable voters. In this early stage of the race, Republicans seem split on whether they can effectively sow doubts about Biden's longevity. Senator Lindsey Graham, RSC, an ally of former President Donald Trump, said of Biden, "I'm not going to say he's too old. I'm going to say that his policies are not working. If he were 35, they wouldn't be working." Inside the White House, aides recognize that an octogenarian boss poses a unique dilemma. They can't make him younger absent a time machine, as one White House advisor ruefully noted. What they've done instead is try to demonstrate the president is active and fit. Biden dons a pair of aviator sunglasses at every turn. A video released announcing his re-election campaign carries a snippet of him jogging in his suit jacket. Missing from the video montage, of course, are images of Biden tripping on the stairs to Air Force One or falling off his bicycle in Delaware. It doesn't register with me. I took a hard look at it before I decided to run, and I feel good, Biden said Wednesday at a joint news conference with his South Korean counterpart, Yoon Suk Yeol.
Well, Joe Biden falling down the stairs has grabbed headlines yet again today. It's become a somewhat regular occurrence that the president takes a tumble in public. Today was no exception, with Joe Biden experiencing an unfortunate fall during a commencement address at the Air Force Academy. He had just finished handing out diplomas when this happened. And it didn't take long for President Biden's predecessor to be asked about the fall.
He just fell on what stage? He's at the Air Force Academy. He actually fell down? Well, I hope he wasn't hurt. I hope he wasn't hurt. But the whole thing is crazy. You got to be careful about that. You got to be careful about that. because you don't want that.
Donald Trump, now 76, and allied political action committees spent millions in ads homing in on Biden's age in 2020, with little to show for it. Trump lost, but Trump is persisting in painting Biden as diminished. Another GOP presidential candidate, 51-year-old Nikki Haley, floated a proposal to give politicians over the age of 75, both Biden and Trump fit that bill, a mental competency test. Tempting as it may be to highlight Biden's age, Republicans can't expect to sweep back into the White House on that argument alone. Some GOP strategists caution. The issue of abortion rights turbocharged Democratic turnout in the midterm elections last year, and also figures to be a galvanizing issue in 2024. If the choice comes down to Biden and Trump, Democrats may swallow any misgivings about Biden in hopes of quashing any comeback from the twice-impeached ex-president.
Well, I want to thank everybody. This is a fantastic state. This is a great, great state. You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now. Three. We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember, in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7, but now I just walked up and it's at 14.
The election campaigns are in full swing, and we can already see that Biden is losing. Do not forget to comment on the video and watch other, not more interesting videos on our channel.